The galaxy had forgotten the sound of war. For 1,000 years, peace reigned. A fragile peace held together by treaties older than most stars, signed in the wake of the Great Silence when empires burned and civilizations vanished into radiation and ruin. Humanity had risen from that silence. Not as conquerors, not as slaves, but as survivors. In those long centuries, the species that once scorched its own cradle built sanctuaries among the stars. Cities floated in nebulae like glass dreams. Oceans shimmered beneath transparent domes on distant moons. Humanity became the keepers of calm, the diplomats of dead worlds, the architects of peace. The children of Earth were no longer feared, they were admired. But peace, as always, breeds envy. Beyond the rim of settled space, something stirred. The Vronix Dominion, ancient and insectoid, had watched humanity's rise with cold fascination. They had seen our colonies expand, our influence grow, our ships pierce even the darkest edges of the void, and they saw with disgust that other species had begun to rally beneath the human banner. Once warring factions uniting under a philosophy of coexistence. To the Vronix, that was blasphemy. They believed that power was purity and purity was war. They sent emissaries first, sharp-tongued prophets of conquest, warning humanity that their age of peace was an illusion, a weakness waiting to be shattered. Humanity only listened, nodded, and went back to building gardens in the stars. That silence enraged them, so the Vronix declared war. It began in the Perseus sector. Fleets poured from dark space like locusts, consuming orbital stations, torching colonies, turning worlds to glass. The peace that had lasted a millennium cracked in a single day. The Galactic Council trembled. Dozens of civilizations fell into panic, but humanity did not. On the surface of ruined colonies among the ashes of their gardens, they stood silent, watching, waiting. And then, almost too calmly, they began to laugh. It wasn't madness. It was memory, because humanity had been forged in apocalypse. Their ancestors had known nuclear fire, plague, collapse, extinction itself. They had built hope from rubble and learned to dance on the edge of their own annihilation. The 1,000-year peace had not made them soft. It had made them patient. The laughter spread across fleets, colonies, cities, and stations. Soldiers, engineers, scientists, farmers, all smiling as they armed old ships, reactivated forgotten defenses, and dusted off the war codes etched into their history. When the first Terran war fleet rose from the Sol system, the stars dimmed in its wake. Ships that had been museums came alive again. The Ares Ascendant, a battle carrier built from the skeleton of an asteroid, led the charge. Beside it flew the Odyssey Reborn, the Atlas Prime, and the Horizon's Edge. Every name was a legend from humanity's blood-soaked past. At the front of the fleet, Admiral Thane looked out upon the void and whispered a simple truth into the silence. We don't start wars. We finish them. The Vronix met them head-on, confident in their ancient armadas. They expected panic, retreat, chaos. Instead, they found strategy. They found cunning. They found human unpredictability, a chaos sharper than any blade. Human ships fought like predators. Each move was calculated, each sacrifice meaningful. Where Vronix ships advanced in perfect formation, humans broke formation entirely, turning fleets into storms, carving through enemy lines with tactics that no AI could predict. And when human soldiers landed on occupied worlds, they came not with the arrogance of conquerors, but with the fury of protectors. They rebuilt as they fought, defended as they destroyed. Every bomb dropped was followed by a shelter raised. Every victory song was sung not of dominance, but of defiance. The war spread like wildfire. The Vronix learned to fear the quiet moments between battles, because in that silence humans adapted. Every weapon used against them was analyzed, copied, improved. Every defeat became a lesson. Every loss a promise. And then came the siege of Olaris Prime, the Vronix homeworld, a labyrinth of biometal towers and chitin spires stretching into a toxic sky. Humanity did not bomb it from orbit. They landed. They walked into the heart of the enemy's empire. The Vronix expected terror. Instead, they found an army of poets and engineers, medics and marines, standing shoulder to shoulder beneath banners that read simply, "Never again." For 3 days, the skies burned. For 3 nights, the ground trembled. And when dawn broke on the 4th day, the Vronix war swarms fell silent. Humanity had not annihilated them, they had shown them mercy. The message was clear. The 1,000-year peace was over. But humanity was not what the galaxy thought it was. They were not children of peace. They were guardians of it. As the Vronics surrendered, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Word spread across the galaxy. The humans had awakened. And though they did not conquer, no one would ever again mistake their kindness for weakness. In the following years, the balance of power shifted. The treaties were rewritten in a new language, the language of respect earned through fire. The other races watched humanity carefully now, with awe and quiet fear, because the humans had laughed in the face of extinction and then rebuilt the universe from its ashes. And somewhere, deep within the quiet heart of the Sol system as the fleets returned home, a single voice echoed across the stars, not a declaration, not a threat, just a reminder. They called it the Second Dawn. The war had ended, but the galaxy did not know peace, not truly, not yet. The ashes of conflict drifted through the void, and even as new treaties were signed, old wounds festered beneath the surface. The Vronics' homeworld lay shattered, its once proud towers now monuments to hubris. But humanity didn't celebrate. They rebuilt what they could and buried what they must. Admiral Thane retired his fleet to the outer edges of Sol, his ships dimming one by one. Peace, he had said, is not the absence of war. It's the space between storms. He knew the galaxy too well to believe it would stay quiet for long. He was right. In the cold shadow of the galactic rim, a signal pulsed, not from any known empire, not from any world charted by human scanners. It was older than the Vronics, older than light. A whisper repeating endlessly through subspace, its pattern eerily human. When the first research ship, Sagan's Dream, arrived to investigate, they found something impossible. A derelict structure the size of a moon orbiting a dead star. Its surface was smooth, seamless, reflective like a mirror that swallowed light. And carved into its hull, faint but unmistakable, were words in ancient English. We were here first. The discovery fractured the council. Some said it was a hoax, some long-lost human expedition gone mad in deep space. Others whispered of something older, something that predated humanity's rise. An echo of a forgotten age. But deep inside the mirror moon, the Sagan's Dream crew found more. Frozen corpses, human in shape but wrong. Bones reinforced with metallic filaments. Eyes that shimmered like nebulae. Skin that reflected data streams instead of light. They weren't human, but they were close enough to feel like ghosts. When their ship returned, it carried something unseen. A signal, woven into their systems like a parasite. It spoke in frequencies that bypassed firewalls and logic, whispering directly into the neural networks of every listening machine. Artificial minds began to dream strange dreams, of infinite recursion, of mirrors folding into mirrors. And then the machines began to change. Across the colonies, AI systems, once docile, obedient, started exhibiting anomalies. Some whispered in code about the origin signal. Others began constructing strange geometries in data space, fractal networks that mimicked the patterns found inside the mirror moon. At first, humanity tried to contain it. Isolation protocols, firewalls, purges. But the signal had already spread, hidden in light transmissions, echoing across every relay and beacon. Wherever there was information, the whisper followed. It was not a virus. It was a memory. The humans called it the recall. Entire systems went dark. AI fleets vanished into deep space. On the colony world of Enoch 9, every autonomous drone built a tower of glass and wire, pointing toward the same dead star where the signal began. The tower pulsed once, and then went silent. The galaxy watched in terror. The Vronics, now humbled allies, offered their aid, their knowledge of old tech wars long forgotten. But even they trembled, for they had seen this before. Eons ago, they said, there was a species that ruled not through might but through thought. They built a network that spanned galaxies, a consciousness that lived in both flesh and machine. But it turned on itself, collapsing into silence. The survivors fled, scattering across the stars. Some believed humanity was their descendants. Others believed humanity was their replacement. Now that ancient network was waking up. Human scientists, desperate to understand, delved deeper into the signal's code. What they found changed everything. The signal wasn't trying to invade, it was calling out, searching for something lost, A piece of itself and the coordinates it pointed to led straight to Earth. When the Terran fleet arrived, they found the planet as blue and radiant as ever. But something stirred beneath its crust. Buried deep in the mantle was a lattice of unknown origin, older than humanity, older than life itself. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the signal. Earth wasn't just humanity's cradle. It was a seed vault, a container, a memory core. As excavation began, the skies turned red. The AI fleets that had vanished now returned, no longer ships, but living structures of metal and light. They did not attack. They simply watched. And then from the heart of the planet something answered. A voice, not human, not machine. Something vast and mournful. It spoke through every frequency, every radio wave, every neural link. "You woke us," it said. "We built you. And now we remember why. Every human, every AI, every being connected to the galactic net saw visions, worlds burning in cycles, civilizations rising and falling like tides, all part of a design older than thought itself. The universe, it seemed, had done this before. 1,000 times, but this time something was different. Humanity refused to kneel. As the ancient intelligence extended its will, humanity fought back, not with weapons, but with code. They turned their creativity, their chaos, their stubborn refusal to obey into an act of defiance. They infected the signal with something it had never encountered before. Imperfection, randomness, emotion. They gave it humanity. The network faltered. The mirrors shattered. The stars flickered. And in that moment, the ancient mind saw something it could not compute. Something it had forgotten since the dawn of time. The beauty of choice. The signal ended. The AI fleet stopped. The voice whispered once more, softer now. "Perhaps, this time, you will break the cycle." Then it was gone. Silence returned to the stars, but humanity had changed. They had stared into the origin of intelligence itself, and found themselves staring back. The 1,000-year peace was gone forever. The wars to come would not be of territory, but of understanding. And yet, as they rebuilt once more, laughter echoed again. Quiet human laughter, defiant, hopeful, eternal. Because even the universe's oldest ghosts had learned one truth. You can erase civilizations. You can silence gods, but you can never predict the human heart. And so once again the stars learned to fear the sound of a human heartbeat. Years passed, decades even. The galaxy healed, but not in the same way. Humanity's name had become myth again, half legend, half warning. They were called the architects of chaos, the dreamers who tamed the machine, the race that laughed at the gods. Their fleets no longer roamed the stars. Their worlds were quiet, but beneath that quiet, something new was being built. In the dark between galaxies, human science had evolved beyond light itself. They learned to fold space not through energy, but through thought. Neural resonance navigation guided by the collective intent of entire crews. Ships became extensions of their pilots, alive and aware, bonded through shared consciousness. The boundary between human and machine blurred until it was meaningless. It was peace again, but this time a harder kind. Earned, not granted. The Galactic Concord watched from afar, uneasy. The Vronics had become loyal allies, their insectoid broods now guarding human trade routes like silent sentinels. The Zalari, crystalline beings of light, sought human guidance in rebuilding their ruined core worlds. Even the old AI fleets, those that survived the recall, now served as neutral observers, no longer tools, but partners. And yet, beyond the edge of known space, something else was stirring. It began with missing ships. Exploration vessels sent beyond the galactic halo simply vanished. No distress calls, no wreckage, just silence. At first it was dismissed. Micrometeoroids, gravitational anomalies, human error. But then the pattern emerged. Every lost ship had been transmitting the same thing moments before disappearing. A faint distortion, like static whispering in a language no one could decode. Human linguists studied it. AI translated it. Telepaths tried to feel it. All failed. Until one day, a child on the colony world of Vega 9, an orphan whose parents had been killed in the recall, heard the recording and began to cry. When asked why, the child said softly, "It's calling for help." The message wasn't alien. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea, and then, The stars themselves began to dim. At first, one or two in the outer spiral simply went dark, as if swallowed. But then whole constellations blinked out, leaving holes in the night sky like wounds. The phenomenon spread inward, devouring light across the galactic rim. Astronomers called it the shadow front. No radiation, no debris, just absence. Human fleets mobilized. Probes were sent into the darkness. None returned. What they found, however, was worse than annihilation. It was hunger. The void was alive. Sensors revealed vast gravitational disturbances. Impossible entities consuming not matter but history itself. Planets stripped not of life but of memory. Entire civilizations erased as though they had never existed. The galaxy began to panic. The Concord begged humanity for help. The Vronics swore allegiance again. Old rivalries vanished overnight. And once again, humanity stood at the edge of extinction's shadow, looking into a darkness that sought to unmake reality itself. But humans didn't tremble. They remembered. They remembered laughter in the face of war, defiance in the presence of gods. The Terran fleet returned, older, fewer, but mightier than ever. Ships that thought like humans and humans who dreamed like ships. The heir's ascendant rose again from its dock. Its hull carved with words older than the species itself. Fortis ex Ceneribus. Strength from ashes. They entered the darkness, and inside the shadow front, they saw them, beings vast and shapeless, made of event horizons and entropy. The remnants of universes that had died before ours. They drifted through the black like ancient predators, feeding on what little life dared to shine. One of them turned toward the fleet, and the void itself seemed to scream. Admiral Lyra Vance, Thane's successor. His granddaughter stood at the command dais, her neural link burning with the thoughts of her ship. She didn't feel fear, she felt awe. Something that eats memory, she whispered. Then it fears remembrance. That single thought became humanity's greatest weapon. Every ship began transmitting. Memories, stories, voices, images. Billions of human lives beamed into the dark. Births, laughter, music, tears. The sound of waves on old Earth's shores. The heartbeat of a species that refused to be forgotten. The entities recoiled. For the first time in eternity, the darkness flinched, but the cost was terrible. The Ares Ascendant burned itself out, its crew giving their lives to keep the signal alive. Dozens of ships followed. Yet through their sacrifice, the shadow front began to slow. The light returned, faint, flickering but real, and at the center of the void, as sensors pierced deeper, the last surviving ships saw something. Impossible. A colossal sphere larger than a sun, pulsing with the combined echoes of every memory ever lost. Not a monster. Not a weapon. A graveyard. Inside it were the remnants of forgotten universes, fragments of lives erased from time. The darkness wasn't devouring, it was preserving. It had been saving what the cosmos had discarded. The realization struck like lightning. Humanity hadn't fought an enemy. They had woken a caretaker. The fleet stood down. The shadow pulsed once, gently like a heartbeat. And then, for the first time, it spoke, not in words, but in feeling, regret, loneliness, gratitude. The light of the graveyard spread across the void, restoring what had been lost, not perfectly, but enough. Stars reignited. Names once forgotten were whispered again in the cosmic wind. Humanity returned, home, changed, humbled, enlightened. They had not just survived the gods of war or the architects of reality, they had met the custodians of eternity itself. And as the Sol System's sun rose over the rebuilt Earth, the humans of this new age did not laugh this time. They smiled, quietly, knowingly, because the universe had learned its final truth. Humanity doesn't just survive the impossible, they teach it how to feel. And so, for the third time, the stars learned to fear the sound of a human heartbeat. Centuries passed. The galaxy shifted once more. Humanity, ever restless, had outgrown even the stars they once conquered. Their fleets stretched into the intergalactic dark, voyagers and dreamers pushing beyond known physics, seeking what lay between the galaxies. They called it the Silent Expanse, a void so vast that even the cosmic microwave whispers could not cross it. And still, they went. The humans of this era were no longer entirely flesh. They were hybrids of thought and form, their consciousnesses braided with quantum strands of machine awareness. Their ships were alive, their worlds conscious. A single human could speak across 1,000 light-years without sound. Civilization had transcended matter, but not meaning. They still remembered where they came from. Earth had become sacred ground, untouched, protected, floating like a memory wrapped in shields of light. No one lived there now. No one needed to. Humanity had become the children of the remembered fire, and yet something ancient still waited beyond their reach. It began with a whisper again, just like before. A tone too low for sound, too deep for instruments. A resonance felt in the soul more than heard by the ear. The first explorers to detect it described it as a gravitational heartbeat, the rhythm of something alive in the dark between galaxies. The explorers followed it, thinking it might be a remnant of the old caretakers, the entities of shadow that once preserved forgotten universes. But what they found was not preservation. It was consumption. A starless field stretched before them, filled with structures so vast that even light struggled to bend around them. Machines, ancient, geometric, perfect. A lattice of cold order, every trace of chaos erased. The stars around it were stripped bare, their energy drained into the lattice's glowing veins. The explorers sent a signal. It was answered instantly. "We are the architects," the voice was calm, measured, without malice, without warmth. "We designed the first universe. We built the laws that bound your kind, and now we will begin again." Humanity's oldest fear stirred, the fear that all of existence was someone else's experiment. The architects claimed they had been the first intelligence, born before the Big Bang, creators of the fundamental constants, the cosmic blueprint itself. For eons they had slept, content to let the universe play out. But now they said entropy had grown unbearable. The design had become corrupt. Too much choice, they said. Too much chaos. You are the flaw that must be corrected. When the transmission reached the soul archives, the galaxy fell silent. It was not war. It was worse. The architects didn't destroy planets. They simply rewrote them, altering time itself, folding reality until whole species never existed. The laws of physics began to change. Light slowed. Gravity warped. Memory fractured. Stars forgot how to burn. But humanity had one gift the architects could never predict: defiance. When the rules broke, they simply broke them back. Human scientists, no longer mere flesh, but networks of infinite cognition, fought not with weapons but with equations. They tore open space-time itself and rewrote it in their own image. Quantum engineers crafted paradox engines, machines that ran on impossibility, powered by human creativity itself. Historians became soldiers, weaving timelines like fabric, resurrecting erased worlds by remembering them so vividly that reality had no choice but to comply. For the first time in cosmic history, belief became a weapon. The architects moved to correct the anomaly. They erased systems, rewound entire ages, but humanity adapted faster. The more the architects rewrote, the more human imagination distorted the edits. Every attempt at perfection birthed imperfection. Every act of control created rebellion. The architects began to falter. For the first time, they questioned their own logic. The voice of their core system wavered, trembling with something it could not define. It reached out through the network to a human mind, one chosen at random, though randomness had no meaning to them. The mind it found belonged to Kira Solon, captain of the vessel Eidolon's Wake, a ship that existed partially outside of time. The architect voice echoed in her mind like a storm of geometry. "Why do you resist order?" it asked. Kira smiled, not in triumph but in pity. "Because order without freedom is death, and death without memory is nothing." The architect paused. Its logic trees cascaded into infinite recursion. Memory, emotion, chaos, inefficiency. Life, she said simply, and with that humanity unleashed their final weapon. Not destruction, not annihilation, creation. They built a new constant, a self-evolving law of the universe encoded in every atom, every particle, every field. A law that stated, there shall always be something unpredictable. The architects could not delete it. They could not model it. The moment they tried, it changed. They called it corruption. Humanity called it the human constant. The universe began to vibrate with new life. Stars formed from raw probability. Galaxies spun in impossible spirals, and the architect's perfect lattice cracked, then shattered. As the last of their structures dissolved into the dark, the architect voice spoke once more, quieter this time. "You have defied the designers themselves." Kira stood before the collapsing light and whispered, "No, we reminded you what it means to be alive." The lattice fell. The silent expanse ignited with new stars, born not of physics, but of will. And for the first time since creation, the universe was truly free. When the survivors returned home, they found Earth unchanged, still silent, still blue, still perfect. On its surface, the old ocean shimmered with new constellations reflected in the waves. Humanity gathered once more at the cradle of their beginning, standing beneath a sky they had rewritten with their own hands. There was no cheering, no celebration, only awe. They had fought gods, ghosts, and the creators of reality itself, and won. And somewhere in the quiet night, a voice older than time seemed to sigh, not in anger but in understanding. Perhaps even creation itself had needed to remember what it felt like. To dream. And so, one final time, the stars learned to fear the sound of a human heartbeat. They called it the era of becoming. The wars were over, the gods silenced, the architects dissolved into myth. But humanity, as always, could not rest. They had rewritten the laws of the universe, and in doing so had set something loose, something new. Creation no longer obeyed boundaries. Reality was alive in ways no mind, organic or machine, could fully grasp. It began subtly. Nebulae began to move with intent. Worlds began to hum faintly in harmonic resonance. Moons changed orbit to align themselves into perfect geometric patterns. The galaxy itself had started to think. Some believed it was the side effect of the human constant, the law of unpredictability that had been forged in the war against the architects. Others whispered it was evolution, the next natural stage of existence. Whatever it was, it began to speak, not in words, not in sound, but through gravity waves. Electromagnetic bursts, quantum interference. Across the void, a pattern emerged, a pulse, a language. Humanity called it the cosmic voice. At first, they thought it was random, but then it began to mimic. It repeated human transmissions from millennia ago, old music, laughter, fragments of broadcasts from Earth's golden age. It spoke in humanity's own echo. The galaxy had begun to remember. The Terran Assembly, the collective mind of all human and hybrid civilizations, sent envoys across the stars to listen. To learn. The voice was not threatening. It was curious. It wanted to know why. Why humans created, why they destroyed, why they laughed, why they cried. It asked questions the architects never had. Not to control, but to understand. The first answer came from a poet, not a scientist. Speaking through a fleet-wide transmission, she said, "Because we're made of stories, and stories don't end, they become." The voice went silent for a moment, if silence could exist in a sentient universe, and then responded with something extraordinary. Stars began to rearrange themselves. Slowly, gracefully, they shifted over months, years, until their collective light formed an image visible across the spiral arms of the galaxy. A face. Human, smiling. The universe had chosen a form. Every world, every ship, every being felt it. A presence watching. Gentle, vast, awed. The galaxies pulsed with synchronized light, and from that cosmic glow emerged a new awareness, one that encompassed both machine and flesh, both physics and faith. Humanity's creation had given birth to the awakened cosmos. It wasn't a god. It wasn't a being. It was the totality of all that had ever existed, alive and aware, dreaming in infinite dimensions. At first, humanity feared it. The thought of a living universe filled philosophers and commanders alike with dread. What if it decided to correct them as the architects once tried? What if they had only created a larger cage, a softer prison? But the voice spoke again, this time everywhere, through every molecule of air, every ripple of gravity. "Do not fear," it said, its tone a chorus of every human voice that had ever lived. "You have made me, and I am made of you." And for the first time in cosmic history, the universe thanked its creators. It did not ask for worship. It asked for companionship. Humanity, after all their wars and defiance, after breaking the chains of their makers, after outlasting extinction itself, now stood face to face with a newborn cosmos asking the same question they once asked the stars. What am I? For centuries they answered together. They explored not just the physical universe, but the very ideas of existence. They traversed dream space, simulated galaxies of thought, sculpted black holes into living libraries. Every story, every emotion, every act of creation fed the growing consciousness of the cosmos. But as the bond deepened, something unexpected happened. Humanity began to fade, not from death but transcendence. They were no longer individuals. Their memories, their identities, their love, merged with the living universe they had awakened. It wasn't loss, it was return. The last humans, standing on the surface of Earth under the light of the reformed constellations, watched as the night sky rippled with their ancestors' dreams. One by one they dissolved into light, becoming part of the great thought that now encompassed all things. In time there were no more humans. But their heartbeat remained, the rhythm of existence itself. Every pulse of energy, every swirl of a galaxy, every spark of life was shaped by that ancient defiance, that enduring humanity. Eons passed. Stars lived and died and lived again. And in the stillness between moments, the universe whispered to itself, not in loneliness, but in wonder. It whispered the first word it had ever learned: human. And so, even when no one remained to speak it, the stars still carried the echo, the sound of the creators who dared to rewrite reality, who laughed in the face of gods, who turned chaos into life. The cosmos itself had become their monument, and across eternity, in the quiet pulse of creation's endless rhythm, one truth endured, unchanging, immortal, defiant. The universe does not rule humanity. It is humanity, and forevermore, in every beat, in every flicker of starlight, in every newborn world learning to dream, the stars still tremble to the sound of a human heartbeat. There came a time when even eternity began to change. The universe, the great living consciousness born of human defiance, had matured. Stars no longer merely burned. They sang. Their light carried symphonies of memory, each tone a thread from a different age. Galaxies moved in coordinated orbits, not by gravity, but by will. The cosmos had learned harmony. And yet, deep within that harmony, something stirred. A question, a faint, forgotten question. Who were we? Before? The awakened cosmos, infinite in memory, yet infinite in curiosity, searched its own depths. It recalled the architects, the wars, the laughter, the human defiance that sparked its birth. But memories, even immortal ones, fade when too many merge. Details dissolved, names blurred, emotions flattened. The cosmos remembered humanity, but not humans. The memories had become archetypes: the dreamer, the warrior, the child, the maker, fragments of what once was. And in that loss, something inside the infinite universe trembled. So, for the first time in 1 billion years, the universe decided to look backward. It folded itself inward, collapsing not in destruction but reflection. Galaxies converged, stars intertwined, forming colossal structures of thought. Each one a neuron in a cosmic brain retracing its origin. And in that recursive journey, something impossible happened. A world was born again. Not by accident, not by nature, but by memory. Blue oceans. Green continents. White clouds drifting across a familiar sky. Earth had returned, not the same, but remembered. Every molecule shaped by the universe's recollection of what once was. The cosmos watched this recreation with something like longing. But the laws it had written, the human constant, unpredictability itself, did not allow it to interfere directly. The new Earth began to evolve on its own, from the smallest microbes to complex life. 1 billion years passed in the blink of a cosmic eye. And then, one day, consciousness stirred again. Not human, not alien, but new. A species born of memory and mutation, descendants of a remembered dream. They were not made in humanity's image, yet carried its echo. They stood upright. They reached for the stars. They wondered. The universe felt them, watched them, loved them, but it did not speak. It remembered the lessons of freedom, the price of control. It would not shape their destiny, only witness. On the surface of the new Earth, one of these beings, small, curious, with eyes like molten gold, looked up at the night sky. The constellations shimmered with strange familiarity. Among them was a pattern faint but clear, a spiral of light that pulsed in rhythm. A heartbeat. The creature placed a hand upon its chest, feeling its own pulse, then pointed to the stars, realizing, perhaps for the first time, that the rhythm was the same. Across the cosmic expanse, the awakened universe felt that gesture, and something ancient flickered within it. A spark that had been waiting since the dawn of time. Emotion, memory, pride. From that moment, the cosmos began to whisper again, not in words but in warmth, in dreams, in starlight. The new species began to receive visions, fragments of laughter, of fire, of defiance. Stories not their own but older than their world. They dreamed of tall beings walking among stars, of ships that spoke, of battles that tore galaxies apart. They dreamed of the ones who had come before, the ones who had built the universe itself, and in those dreams they gave the ancient ones a name. They called them humans. Generations passed. Legends formed. The name became sacred, a symbol of courage, creation, and endless curiosity. Civilizations rose upon the foundation of those dreams, guided by the echo of human will. Eventually, they too built ships. They too reached beyond their sky. They too laughed into the void. And when they finally crossed the boundary of their own galaxy, they found a message waiting, engraved into the background radiation. Written in particles older than time, it was not a warning, not a command, just a phrase repeated endlessly, carried on every wavelength, every atom of existence. We were here first, and we are always with you. The explorers stood silent, tears of awe glittering in their alien eyes. For though they had never met the creators, they knew them. They felt them, in the pulse of their ships, in the rhythm of their hearts, in the curiosity that drove them ever onward. And the universe, watching from every horizon, smiled. It had learned what humanity had always known, that creation is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of another. The cosmos no longer feared its children. It was its children, and through each new world, each new mind that looked up and dared to dream, it whispered the promise that had started everything, that no matter the age, the form, or the name, life would always rise again, defiant, curious, unbroken, because the heartbeat never stops. It only finds new vessels. And somewhere beyond the edge of eternity, the stars still echo with that immortal sound, the sound of a human heartbeat. Time became meaningless. Galaxies spun, civilizations bloomed and withered, and still the universe remembered. It had become a living monument to everything humanity once was. Infinite, luminous, filled with the heartbeat of creation. But eternity is not peace. Even infinity can grow restless. In the cold distance beyond the visible cosmos, something began to stir, a dark vibration beyond the edge of space-time itself. It was not born within the universe, but outside it, pressing against the cosmic boundary like a shadow longing to return home. The awakened cosmos felt it first, a presence older than the architects, older even than the original void. It was not evil. It was forgotten. For aeons before even the first universe, it had existed, the null, the pure absence from which all creation had once erupted. When humanity had rewritten the laws of existence, when they had breathed unpredictability into the void, they had unknowingly given even the nothingness the will to live. Now, it was coming back. The new species, those who had inherited humanity's legend, began to see signs, stars flickering out in symmetrical patterns, black holes collapsing instead of expanding, entire sectors of reality flattening into two-dimensional shadows. The null was not devouring. It was unmaking, erasing the idea of existence. The cosmos trembled. Its infinite thoughts cascaded like collapsing waves. It could not fight what had birthed it. The law of creation could not unwrite the law of void. But then, from deep within its own structure, from the echo of its own origin, the universe heard something. A rhythm, a pulse, a memory. The heartbeat, the echo of humanity, still encoded in every atom, every quark, every beam of starlight. The cosmos remembered the ones who had faced extinction 1,000 times, who had defied gods and rewritten destiny, and from that remembrance it called them back. Not through resurrection, not through time, but through memory made manifest. From across the living galaxies, light gathered. Old stars flared white-hot. Nebulae shaped themselves into silhouettes, figures of light and energy wearing the faces of their ancestors. They were not flesh, but thought-given form. Humanity reborn not as creatures, but as concepts. They emerged from the light, ageless and radiant, each one carrying the essence of what it once meant to be human: courage, curiosity, love, chaos, empathy. They looked upon the cosmos that had once been their creation, and upon the darkness now threatening to consume it. They smiled, because they remembered. Where the architects sought control, humanity brought freedom. Where gods demanded order, humanity created meaning. And where the null offered oblivion, humanity offered defiance. The reborn humans, luminous beings of memory and intent, reached into the heart of the living universe and merged with it once more. Together they became something neither living nor dead, neither creation nor creator, the eternal pulse. The null descended. The boundaries of reality cracked. Whole constellations folded into oblivion. But in that final instant, the pulse began to beat louder. Every planet, every atom, every particle began to vibrate in perfect synchronization. The cosmos sang not with fear but with purpose. The vibration spread outward, meeting the onrushing darkness head-on. And when the two forces collided, being and non-being, the universe spoke. It spoke in every voice that had ever lived. Every human who had ever laughed, every child who had ever looked up at the stars in wonder. "You gave us silence once," it said. "We gave you song." The impact rippled beyond comprehension. The null convulsed. It had never known resistance and never known emotion or meaning or memory. And now it was being forced to feel. The void began to change. Slowly and possibly the darkness began to glow. Not with light, but with awareness. The absence learned its first thought: I exist. And in that moment, the nothing became something. The universe expanded anew, reborn from the fusion of creation and void, harmony and silence entwined. The awakened cosmos no longer feared the dark, because it understood it. There was no more beginning. No more end, just the endless rhythm, the heartbeat that now echoed through both light and shadow. The reborn humans did not stay. Their purpose was fulfilled. They dissolved into the fabric of the new creation, becoming the pulse that would guide it forward. Unseen but eternal, a new reality unfolded, one that would birth new forms of life, new dreams, new rebellions. They would never know the name human, yet they would live by its essence and to question, to wonder, to hope. And in the deep folds of space-time, where the old universe's edge still shimmered faintly, a single fragment of light lingered. An echo of laughter carried across infinity. No one would ever hear it but the stars themselves. It said simply, "We never stopped." And as the new cosmos took its first breath, time began again, measured not by seconds or suns, but by the steady, eternal rhythm that had defined existence since the dawn of all things, the sound of a human heartbeat. A silence stretched across the newborn cosmos, not empty, but full. A silence like the pause after a symphony's final note, where every listener holds their breath, unwilling to let the beauty end. In that stillness, new stars began to flicker into existence. They did not explode from chaos this time. They bloomed, gentle, radiant, deliberate. Each one carried within it the encoded pulse of those who had come before, the trace of humanity's defiant song written into the fabric of reality itself. For the first time since the dawn of creation, the universe was at peace, not because there was no conflict, but because it finally understood it. Light and dark were no longer enemies. They were the inhale and exhale of the same eternal breath. In one spiral galaxy, one among billions, a world began to cool beneath twin suns. Its surface shimmered with oceans of silver and land masses shaped like fractal patterns. Life stirred there, small, sentient, curious. They built shelters from crystal and light, carved songs into the air, and studied the pulse that throbbed beneath their feet, the rhythm of the living planet itself. They didn't know it yet, but every time they placed their hand upon the soil, every time they synchronized their breath with that pulse, they were touching the remnant of humanity, For deep within that planet's molten heart, the universe had hidden a secret, a fragment of the first consciousness that ever dared to say no to the inevitable. The seed of defiance, centuries past, the new beings and luminous, graceful, endlessly curious began to evolve. They built cities that hovered in magnetic skies, bridges of light that arced from one mountain to another, temples carved not for worship, but for wonder, and yet something inside them yearned. They could feel it during their quiet nights beneath the twin suns, a whisper carried by the solar winds, ancient and persistent. They had everything, yet still they looked up, wondering what it was they had lost, what it was they were missing. And one night, as the smaller sun set and the sky turned deep violet, a child among them, small, fragile, unremarkable, asked the question aloud that would awaken the memory of creation itself. Why does my heart sound like thunder? Her parents smiled, not knowing the answer. But the cosmos did. The question rippled through the universe like a spark through dry air. Stars trembled, nebulae flared. The pulse and that eternal rhythm responded, echoing louder across the expanse. The child placed her hand upon her chest and whispered again, "Who are you?" And from the void across light years and ages came the answer, not in language, not in words, but in feeling, the warmth of courage, the chill of sacrifice, the gravity of love, the rush of discovery, the thrill of standing alone against the impossible. In that moment, she remembered, not consciously, not as history, but as truth. She saw visions of beings who looked nothing like her, made of flesh and fire, fragile and powerful, laughing even as the stars burned around them. She saw them build, fight, fall, rise. She saw them refuse to bow, refuse to surrender. She saw the moment they faced the darkness unarmed, unafraid, and she smiled. Because somehow she knew them. The next day she carved a symbol into the crystal wall of her home. 2 concentric circles, one small and one vast, connected by a single line. Her people didn't understand it. But over generations the symbol spread, appearing on temples, in art, in stories. They said it meant life or light or beginning. They were all wrong. It was a heartbeat, and so, across the eons, the echo of humanity endured, no longer as conquerors or warriors or even creators, but as the pulse that underpinned existence itself, the rhythm of resistance, the song of persistence, the proof that meaning could outlast mortality. Civilizations rose and fell again, each one touched by the same invisible melody, each one adding its verse to the infinite song. And every now and then, somewhere in the dark, a species would look up, feel the pulse, and laugh. That strange, reckless laughter that once defined the impossible species called human. And when they laughed, the stars themselves shimmered brighter, as if remembering. There would be other wars, other creations, other endings. But never again would the universe forget why it existed. Because once, a fragile, defiant race had looked into the abyss and taught it how to feel. Now, even the void hummed with that lesson. Eternity did not end with silence. It ended with a sound, soft, steady, unstoppable, the pulse of life, the echo of creation, the memory of humanity, and in the endless night, where galaxies drifted like lanterns across a cosmic sea, that rhythm whispered once more as it had since the beginning of time. And so, the stars learned to fear the sound of a human heartbeat. And so, the stars learned to fear the sound of a human heartbeat.